Priscillo, the U.S. Ambassador to Mexico. Welcome to this virtual town hall for U.S. citizens in Mexico. I would like to hold this session for two main reasons. First, I'm sure that you're anxious in this time of uncertainty. It'd be odd if you weren't. I'm sure you have questions, and I wanted to make myself and my available to answer them. And second, and more important, I want to tell you directly, your safety and welfare are our one priority here at Mission Mexico. I'm here today with our Consul General in Mexico City, David McCauley, and our attaché for players, Will Ostick, who's going to be reading the questions. I'd like to start by giving some general thoughts and then ask Consul General McCauley to give his own thoughts, and then the rest will really be questions and answers. This is really your forum. I'm not sure we'll have the chance to answer all of them live, but we certainly will answer all of them in writing. I'd like to say just a quick word to our viewers who are international speakers. Nosotros sabemos que hay muchos ciudadanos estadounidenses en México que prefieren hablar español y nos han mandado muchas preguntas en español. Nosotros vamos a contestar estas preguntas en español, pero por ahora esta sesión la vamos a hacer en inglés. Muchas gracias. Turning to the substance, I want to begin by stating the obvious. We are now in an unprecedented worldwide pandemic. This presents a challenge to people and governments everywhere, and the U.S. and Mexico are no exception. Both of our governments have responded to the pandemic in recent weeks by announcing significant restrictions on personal mobility and economic activity. In fact, the Mexican government in the last 24 hours has imposed some more substantial restrictions on non-essential work activities. So the upshot is that if you're a tourist here in Mexico, it's time to go home. The State Department has issued a level 4 travel advisory for the entire world because so many countries have limited access to their borders and so many airlines have cut back on flights. A worldwide pandemic is not a good time for tourism. So again, if there's one thing to get across today, it's that if you're a tourist, this is not a good time to be. If you're a resident here in Mexico, as I am, you have to think long and hard about your own personal situation. Where you live in Mexico, what medical services might be available there if you got sick, your own personal risk profile, if you have any pre-existing conditions, where you live in the U.S., fundamentally, where your support network is located. There's no wrong answer to this, and each and every one of us have to make a personal decision about where we should weather the storm. During a time of crisis like this, the most important thing is communication. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to hold this session. I encourage you to sign up for the STEP program, which is available online at step.state.gov. If you sign up for that program, you'll receive alerts from us, and we can locate you in the event of an emergency. My wife and I signed up yesterday, and we encourage you to do the same. I also just want to emphasize that here in Mexico, the U.S. government is a larger than any country in the world because we're Americans here than any other country in the world. We have the embassy here in Mexico City. We have 9 consulates general throughout the country, and then we have 9 consular agencies beyond that in locations where there are a lot of American citizens. And Consul General McCauley will get into more detail in a moment. But I encourage you to follow the embassy's website, social media platforms, and just stay abreast. And again, there's nothing better than signing up for the STEP program where you will receive automatic alert. In conclusion, I just want to that I hope this hall is helpful to you. That's the whole idea. If it is, we're certainly to do more like this in the future. Let me just say that I feel very fortunate to be here in Mexico. It's a lovely country with warm people. And I know I'm not alone. There are more Americans in Mexico than in any other country in the world. We're all in this together. All the doubts and questions that you may have, we have too. All the frustrations that you may feel being cooped up at home, we have too. I just urge you to try to keep up your spirits. It's a measure of character how you stand up to adversity. And certainly our ancestors faced adversity far greater than this. Godspeed to you and your family. Viva Mexico, and God bless America. Now I'll turn it over to Consul General Cawley. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's a great honor to be taking part in this virtual town hall, and good afternoon, everybody. As a husband and father of teenage girls, all of whom are with me in Mexico, I, like the Ambassador, I think can empathize with everyone trying to come to grips with the disruption and the uncertainty that COVID-19 has brought to our daily lives. There's one thing I have learned in recent weeks, which the Ambassador said, we are all in this together. As Consul General, I am responsible for the consular operations in the capital city and 13 of Mexico's southern states, and I help coordinate consular services for our entire mission. The United States mission in Mexico is extensive, as the Ambassador said. We have the 9 consulates and 9 consular agencies in addition to the embassy here, and we have an agent on the island of Cozumel. We also rely heavily on a network of consular liaison volunteers who are longtime residents, perhaps many of you, like you, who keep us apprised on issues facing U.S. citizens in the communities where they live. For the volunteers on who are participating today, let me say thank you for your willingness to support your fellow citizens in Mexico. In normal times, we pride ourselves providing the public with a full range of consular services. For U.S. citizens, that includes things like passports, consular reports of birth abroad, and notarial services. Our consular sections adjudicate the full range of non-immigrant visas for Mexican nationals who are sitting, studying, or conducting business in the United States. Our consulate in Ciudad Juarez is the only location where we process visas for Mexican nationals moving permanently to the United States to reunite with family members there. Those are services we provide in normal times. These are not normal times. On March 18th, we significantly reduced our staffing to protect the health and safety of our employees and our customers in light of COVID-19. On March 18th, the State Department issued a Level 4 Do Not Travel Global Health Advisory recommending U.S. citizens in the United States cease international travel and urging Americans temporarily overseas to return home unless they intend to stay abroad for an indefinite period. Until further notice, we have suspended routine and American citizen services to focus on essential services. Essential services include the issuance of U.S. passports for those with imminent travel plans to the United States. Please visit our website, mx.usembassy.gov, or contact us by phone at 55-8526-2561 for information on how to schedule an emergency appointment at one of our facilities. Our website has important information you should review, including a page dedicated to COVID-19. In addition to regular updates, there are links to U.S. and Mexican agencies fighting the pandemic. You will also find our General Mexico Travel Advisory, which provides additional information on security and safety conditions across the country. There's also a link to the State Department's main travel information page, travel.state.gov. I would urge you to review that as well. It provides essential information about what services the U.S. government can provide in a crisis and how you can best be prepared at home. Let me end my introductory remarks with a few key points and reminders that address many of the questions you have already raised. Please register in the State Department's Smart Traveler program at step.state.gov to receive important updates. If you're here temporarily, go home. You have access to your normal support networks. Otherwise, be prepared to ride out COVID-19 here in Mexico. If you're planning to visit or vacation in Mexico in the near future, please reconsider. Now is the time to stay home. That holds true even for our U.S. citizens living in our border communities who regularly cross the border into Mexico to shop or visit family or friends. Please stay home. Don't wait till the last minute to depart Mexico. Commercial flights to and from the United States have already been significantly reduced, and we are hearing from our American citizens frustrated about travel. Do not ultimately rely on the U.S. government to help you get home, especially in light of our reduced staffing and the health threat posed by COVID-19. Please avail yourself to commercial flights while they are available. If you're a resident in Mexico and staying put, like many of us, follow the advice of the local health authorities. Make sure you have sufficient supplies at home for you and your pets. Make sure you have your passports and other important documents in a safe place. It's a good time as well to make sure you have adequate supplies of any prescription drugs you or your family members need. Please remember, we do not provide medical insurance for U.S. citizens overseas, and we do not pay for your medical expenses. In general, Medicare and Medicaid do not cover medical costs overseas. I encourage you to review your insurance policies, whether issued here or in the United States, to ensure you have adequate coverage of services in Mexico. Many hospitals require you to pay up front and seek reimbursement from your insurance company. Does your insurance provide for medical evacuation in worst-case scenarios, which in normal times can cost tens of thousands of dollars? If not, you may wish to consider buying a separate policy. Stay connected with family and friends and keep your emergency contacts, including our numbers. In addition to enrolling in STEP, please make sure to follow us on our social media as well. And let me just say, for today's event, we will make every effort to answer questions that have been sent to us previously, and to also answer those questions relative to our operations and services here that are added to that are between today. Thank you. Mr. Ambassador?
Thanks, David. I really appreciate that. Now, Will, can we go to Q's and A's?
Yes, sir. Sir, we have a question from Arlene. She asks, my U.S. residence has many more confirmed cases than my home state in Mexico. Should I shelter in place here or go back to the United States?
Arlene, there's not a right or wrong answer to that question. It all depends on your personal circumstances, where you live in Mexico, your own personal health and risk profile, what your support network is here in Mexico and back in the United States. I know this is a question that all of us who are living here in Mexico have to be asking ourselves at this time. But it's not one where I can say definitively, yes, you should go back, yes, you should stay here. I think it really requires you to be discussing this with particularly with your doctor, if you might be in one of those high-risk categories. And it has to be your own personal comfort level, where you're more comfortable riding out the storm. The answer that's for you isn't necessarily true for someone in a different category. It's very important to understand that U.S. citizens in Mexico, we come in many different shapes and sizes. There's some who are just newborn babies. There's some who are retirees who've been living here for years and no longer have connections back in the States. There's some who are here as tourists. And there's really a different answer for every single category of person. And really, I can't tell you what the right answer is for you. I think that's something that you best discuss with your own doctor and your own family. And I wish you the best on that. It's a tough decision for all of us. But people all over the world are asking these kinds of questions. Thanks, Arlene.
I've got some questions for Consul General McCauley. They're related. Gary asks, if I'm planning to come to Mexico in April for a family birthday celebration, is this non-essential? Will I be able to enter? And Anna asks a similar question. I live in El Paso and cross over to Juarez to visit my dentist and to have lunch with my family. Any additional precautions I should take?
Thank you for those questions, Gary and Anna. To both of you, I would say, if your travel is not essential to Mexico, please stay home now, as we've said. In line with the Level 4 Global Travel Health Advisory, we are encouraging all U.S. citizens to stay put and to avoid international travel. The travel restrictions that were put into place on March 21st at our land borders specifically limits travel to essential travel only. It does not apply to airlines. However, again, unless you have a critical or essential reason to travel at this point, please stay home. Anna, I know a dentist appointment may seem that way. I would talk to your local dentist to see if that's something that perhaps can be addressed closer to your home in the United States.
And let me just add to that and underscore that a lot of activities in Mexico are now announcing. So if you're expecting to come to Mexico for a particular celebration, particular kind of appointments, a lot of those kind of activities in Mexico are shutting down. The situation is changing day by day, if not hour by hour. So don't assume that if you want to come to a doctor's appointment in Mexico, that doctor's clinic is still open. I think you need to be able to, you should certainly check on that, because governments on both in Mexico and the United States have been urging people to stay at home. Because when you travel, you're not only at risk yourself of exposure to COVID-19, but if for some reason you're asymptomatic, you could be bringing COVID-19 to loved ones and other people in Mexico or in the United States. That's why wherever you are, the recommendation is to stay at home for this time period. Thank you.
I have two additional questions for Consul General McCauley. Jim wrote in to ask, will Americans returning home to the USA by car be refused entry? And Robert asks, where can I get updates on the status of border posts or border ports of entry?
Thank you for that question, Jim. U.S. citizens returning home to the United States will be permitted to enter the United States. That is your home entry. And Robert, for updates on the status of border operations, you can go online. CBP has up-to-date information on the status of operations at all our land ports of entry. I would say either going to the United States or coming back to Mexico, also be aware that there are increased health checks being conducted by our immigration and health officials, and that someone that maybe demonstrates symptoms or is sick or informs the immigration inspector that you may have those symptoms could be subject to quarantine. So that is something to take into consideration going north into the United States or south into Mexico.
Ambassador Landau, Hugo from Chicago has a question for you. I'm a U.S. citizen. I have been planning to travel with my parents in Guanajuato over Easter week, like I've done for the last 15 years. Am I going to have problems entering Mexico or returning to the United States?
Hi, Hugo, and greetings in Chicago, one of my favorite cities in our country. You know, as we've been saying, this is not a time for non-essential travel. It sounds like the desire to visit your family during Holy Week is totally understandable. Lots of us had plans for Holy Week, but really, this is not the time for non-essential travel. I would certainly recognize, as I said before, that by traveling, you place yourself at risk and you place your loved ones at risk here in Mexico. And frankly, the Holy Week activities here in Mexico have been substantially curtailed. The U.S. government, as we said before, has recommended that all Americans cease from any kind of recreational or tourism travel during a time of worldwide pandemic. So I'm afraid this Semana Santa, I have to say, I think you're better off staying in Chicago. We urge you to do that. I think the Mexican authorities would also urge you to that. And we all, I think, have to just accommodate ourselves to this new reality and recognize that a lot of the plans we have for the next month or so have to be put on ice. So I'm sorry that you may wind up missing your family this year, but I think it's important to think about your own health and your family's health. Wherever you are, I wish you a very happy Semana Santa.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm told we're having some audio problems with our people who are watching, so we're going to take a 1-minute break. Stay tuned, and we're going to check our audio feeds here to make sure that you can hear us better.
Sorry about that. We are back. And sorry if you're one of the people that is having difficulty hearing this event. As we mentioned at the beginning, we are live and we're trying to do the best we can. We don't think, as far as we can tell, that it's anything to do with our internet here in the city or our connections. It seems like some people in different parts of Mexico are getting this pretty clearly, other people much less so in other parts. Let me just emphasize that you can always see the recording of this, and hopefully you'll have better bandwidth when we're not in the live session. And we remain very open to doing another session like this very soon if this has been helpful to you. And if you were not able to hear a lot of this, again, either you can watch the recording, but we're here to try to make life easier for you. And so I think Will Ostick has a couple of suggestions for those of you who may not be hearing this very well, some technical suggestions to maybe be able to improve your internet connection. Will?
Thank you, sir. We've been getting some suggestions for those of you who may be having some bandwidth issues, either with your internet provider or on your mobile device. Number one is some people suggest to refresh your screen. Press F5 on your computer or refresh your screen on your phone or device. The second is to lower the video quality on the device that you're using to watch us. In the settings menu for the configuration for your Facebook, you can set the video and audio quality. Some of you might have auto selected or a higher number than the recommended setting for this bandwidth. We suggest try 240 or 144, and that might also improve your video quality.
And do they find that at the little
That's the gear or hamburger on their Facebook menu.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for bearing with us.
I have some questions that came in for Consul General McCauley. Robert in Cancun writes, will Mexican immigration automatically extend tourist visas? How do I extend them legally? And a related question from another person says, will I be there illegally if I stay past my 6-month tourist visa without extending?
Thank you to Robert in Cancun. Greetings to our fellow Americans in Quintana Roo. This question, your question says is about extending tourist visas. The tourist is the operative word there. If you are visiting Mexico temporarily, again, as we said earlier, we would urge you to go home to the United States, where you probably have a more permanent network of support to help you get through COVID-19. However, to answer your question specifically, we are not aware that the government of Mexico, its Department of Immigration, will make any exceptions to its immigration rules or laws. We're not anticipating any blanket extensions or waivers for temporary visitors or residents here. That said, it is a question for them to answer. There are immigration offices across the country that are still open, although they too are operating at reduced services. So I would urge American citizens who have questions about their specific immigration status in Mexico to direct their questions to the immigration authorities specifically. Thank you.
I have another question for Consul General McCauley. It's from Catherine. If I do choose to return to the United States temporarily, will I be able to return to Mexico later?
Hi, Catherine. There's a lot that we don't know. Right now, if you have a reason to come back to Mexico, you're living here, for example, if you're crossing a land border and you can show that you're living here or have some other essential reason to come back to Mexico, that will be permitted. We don't really know what the future will bear. I would ask you to pay attention to the news, pay attention to the updates that we post on our website and in our messages. Also, you can also reach out to the Mexican immigration authorities. They have a lot of information online themselves. It's always up to an individual Mexican immigration inspector at the airport to admit you based on your individual circumstances.
Thank you. We have some questions from the comment stream in the Facebook Live. These are both for you, Ambassador Landau. Marco tells us he drove to Mexico City from the United States. When he and his family are ready to go back, will they be quarantined? And Sharon asks the same question. Will she get quarantined when she goes to the United States?
The U.S. officials at the border, really the CDC, have the authority to quarantine anyone who they deem necessary for quarantine. Right now, as I understand it, they are not generally quarantining people coming in from Mexico who do not show any signs of disease. They are generally quarantining people who have been in certain countries in Europe, the Far East, the Near East, China, Iran, upon arrival. So, I can't say that this could be changing as time goes on, but as right now, they are not routinely quarantining people who show no sign of illness and are coming over the border from Mexico. I can't emphasize enough, however, that this is a situation, I think, as we've all experienced over the last few weeks, that has been changing from day to day. So, again, I would just urge, and if you're planning to go back to the United States, it probably makes sense to go back sooner rather than later, because things are changing very quickly. Thanks, Marco.
We have a question from Martha. A lot of people are asking this question, and Consul General McCauley, you touched on it a little bit in your opening remarks. Will the embassy help people leave if they live here and get sick of COVID-19 while they're here in Mexico?
Hi, Martha. That's a very important question, and I know it is on the minds of a lot of our fellow Americans. As I mentioned earlier, medevacing to the United States is really a personal choice, and it's really private companies. So this is why we suggest that you look at your insurance now, either issued in the United States or locally, and whether or not your insurance cover medevac to the United States should you require that. There are separate policies, medevac policies that you can purchase, and if one is not already included in your insurance that you have, you may wish to look at that. Remember, as well as I said, in connection to medevacs, that we are not, unfortunately, able to pay the medical cost or medical bills that Americans overseas incur. Remember that U.S. Medicare and Medicaid also do not apply overseas. And also remember that for medical services in hospitals and clinics here, you often have to pay in cash, even if you're going, or by credit card, even if you're going to be reimbursed by your insurance company later. For permanent residents, many of you know, I think, the availability of medical services in your local community is certainly better than we do. So now is a good time, I think, to check in your trusted medical providers to find out what sort of services they may be able to provide you in the event that you get ill. Thank you.
Let me just jump in on that one as well. As it turns out, my brother and in-law live in California Sur most of the year, and I was talking to them the other day, and they mentioned that they had medical insurance here in Mexico that included medevac insurance, but that they got a rider from their insurance company a few months ago saying that that was not available for COVID-19 or coronavirus. So I think it makes sense for those of you who are relying on private insurance to check your insurance policy. You might want to actually contact your insurer to make sure that whatever your understanding or assumption is about the scope or extent of that coverage in this crisis is correct. So again, if my brother's experience is any guide, there may have been some changes on that recently.
Thank you. Ambassador Landau, we have a question for you from Quinn in Oaxaca. He asks, what is the best way to keep up to date on the closures or flight reductions from Mexico to the United States?
Hi, Quinn, and great to talk to you down in Oaxaca, one of my favorite parts of Mexico. The best way to keep abreast of flights in the United States is to contact the airlines directly. If you're a member of the STEP program, we will provide updates on general closures. If all flights are shutting down from a particular location in Mexico, we'll let you know. But we're not tracking that flight by flight and airline by airline. And frankly, I think those kind of changes in flights and limitations on flights are likely to increase over the next few weeks. So if you're thinking about going home to the United States, it probably behooves you to do so sooner rather than later, and to be flexible in terms of where your destination may be in the United States, and maybe have to make additional connection that you wouldn't ordinarily make. But I think there's really no better source of that information than the airlines themselves. But bear in mind that they're making changes very rapidly, really almost day by day. So please, just be very attentive to that. It's a great question to really underscore that. Don't assume that because you have a return flight in Mexico for a week or 2 weeks from now, that flight will be taking off. This stuff is changing very, very quickly. That's one of the main points we want to emphasize in this session, and one of the main reasons why our State Department has this level 4 do not travel advisory, not just for Mexico. I can't emphasize this enough. This is a worldwide, because we're finding these kind of restrictions and limitations on flights all over the globe. This is not Mexico specific. It's just that in a worldwide pandemic, the best place to be is home.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Landau. We're getting a lot of questions in the comment stream here on the Facebook Live. And for any of those who would like to submit your question later, you can send it to us here at the Embassy at acsmexico Mexico City at state.gov. That's ACS Mexico City at state.gov. We have a question for Consul General McCauley. Robert in La Paz asks us, we are permanent residents in Mexico who need to travel to the United States for medical treatment. Will we have problems traveling by air in May?
Thank you, Robert, and greetings to you in La Paz and those in Baja California Sur. We really can't predict what will be happening in May. As the ambassador just said, commercial options for flights are already starting to be reduced. We are hearing from a number of Americans who are very frightened, actually, in trying to reschedule tickets. So I would suggest if there's any way to move up your medical appointments in the United States to travel, please do so and travel now. Also remember that coming back to Mexico could also be complicated. So you'll have to pay attention to what's happening on this side coming south and whether or not there will be new restrictions, whether there will be new health monitoring that may require someone to be quarantined. So these are things to take into consideration. If it's not urgent medical travel at this point, I would probably urge you to stay home after consulting with your doctors here to see if it's something that you can postpone. Thank you for the question, though.
Thank you. This is also Consul General McCauley. We got a lot of questions about visas, and Catherine asks us, are there any exceptions to allow Mexican citizens B1, B2 visas to come to the U.S. by air, especially if they're the legal parent of a minor U.S. citizen child?
Thank you, Catherine. That's an excellent question. B1 visa, for those who don't know, is a non-immigrant visa that allows someone to travel to the United States for business or for pleasure. That's what most Mexican citizens have who, when they visit the United States, that's what they enter with. The restriction put into place at the border limiting cross-border travel to essential travel is only for land ports of entry. They do not apply to airports. So if one has a B1, B2 visa and is otherwise eligible, you're certainly welcome to travel with your child or anybody to the United States and apply for admission at an airport port of entry in the U.S. Just remember that it's always up to the CBP inspector to formally admit you.
Thank you, David. We've got a question for Ambassador Landau from our Facebook Live viewers. One of our viewers asks, when will the border open again for normal travel?
I wish I knew the answer to that. The current restrictions on the land border run through April 20th. They were initially set in place for 30 days. I hope that at that point we're able to relax those restrictions, but I can't tell you that that's going to be the case. Let me just underscore that the border is not closed. The border remains open to commerce for people who work on either side of the border. And for essential travel. What's essential travel is obviously, at the two extremes, it's easy to tell. Essential is work and commerce. Non-essential is going shopping or for tourism. Those sides are easy. I think it can get kind of fuzzy in the middle, and the individual CBP agents at the port of entry have discretion to not admit people, in those categories. I very much hope that we will see this situation pass quickly and we can go back to normality as quickly as possible. But I certainly can't, as I sit here today, give you a date certain might be.
Thank you. We have some related questions coming from live for Consul General McCauley. One is Ava Maria wants to know whether she can get back by land if all the flights are closed, if that happens. And a related question that we hear a lot is, will the United States government provide charter flights if all flights are canceled? People watching the news and seeing events in Peru, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, they wonder if we'll have charter for them.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Ava Maria. American citizens and lawful permanent residents certainly can travel overland and enter the United States at a land port of entry. And if you're thinking about returning home now, we would encourage you to safely do so, especially in light of the reduced commercial flights. In terms of charter flights, many of you probably have seen in the news where the State Department has been assisting our fellow Americans in other places in the world where commercial services have completely dried up. Charter flights are the absolute last resort, and we would only, the U.S. government only would organize those in situations where no commercial flights are available, and if and conditions on the ground permit. This is why we've been emphasizing all afternoon, if your intention is to return to the United States, to be there for the duration of COVID-19, please do so now. As this goes on, can't predict what will happen, but given our reduced staffing, given the health and safety risk of COVID-19 to our own staff, we will be limited to provide you with emergency service in the field. So please do enroll in STEP so you can get the latest information from us. But again, if you're contemplating returning to the United States now, please avail yourself to a commercial flight and do so as soon as you can.
Thank you very much. Some people are asking me to repeat that email address again, so I'll say it slowly. ACS Mexico City at state.gov. That's Alpha Charlie Sierra Mexico City at state.gov. You can also send us your questions there, and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Ambassador Lando, we have a question from Mike in Tijuana. Tijuana, my favorite place in Mexico. My passport expires in July of 2020. Will I be there to renew it if the consulate stays closed?
Mike, hello up in Tijuana. He is partial to Tijuana because he was the consul general in Tijuana recently. And let me just start with the premise of your question, which is actually incorrect. The consulate general in Tijuana, like all of our facilities here in Mexico, is not closed. It remains open, although not for routine services, for emergency services only. If your passport is going to be expiring in the next couple of months, that is something certainly that you should contact the consulate in Tijuana to make an appointment to get that passport renewed. So I urge you to contact them if your passport is expiring, as you said yours is, in the next few months, to get that passport renewed. And that should be something that you're able to do with the reduced staff that is there in that consulate general. Again, I think if you can get back to the United States before then, that's fine too. But that passport office will be open in the Consulate General in Tijuana, as other ones will throughout Mexico. Thanks for that question, Mike, and good luck in Tijuana.
Thank you, Ambassador Lando. We're also getting some questions about how people can get more information. First, take a look at our Facebook page that you're using for this live stream. We've got a lot of the in there, but I'll repeat again the email, acsmexicocity@state.gov. And if you need to call us, we're at 55-8526-2561. That's the number you can call if you need American Citizen Services from the embassy.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of the STEP program. Again, my wife and I just signed up this weekend, and we've already got lots of updates almost every day from the automatic updates, just giving us information. And so I think that is something that if you sign up, then you will just get these automatically. You don't even have to go to the website, although I think that's always a good idea to do that.
Thank you. We have a question for Consul General McCauley, and we're going to questions like this one about people's individual and personal circumstances. If you don't get an answer from us during this Facebook Live, we'll try to answer your comment or send an email to that acsmexicocity@state.gov, and we'll help you with your individual circumstances. Elizabeth is asking, my husband and I are both American citizens whose baby was born in Mexico. I need to apply for a consular report of birth abroad, but with the shutdown during the pandemic, we are not able to do so. We need to return to the United States with our child very soon. What should we do?
Thank you, Elizabeth. And first of all, congratulations to you and your husband on the birth of your new baby. As a consular officer with more than 20 plus years of experience, there's nothing better, nothing more joyful that we get to do in the consular section to document the births of our new American citizens overseas. So congratulations on that. We are not shut down, as the ambassador just explained. We are open for essential services. A consular report of birth abroad is not deemed necessarily essential service, but if you need to travel to the United, we can certainly issue your child, assuming he qualifies for an American citizen, and it sounds like he does, a U.S. passport, emergency U.S. passport. And you can go on our line to get information about where you can do so. You can do so at the nearest consulate to you. You can call our number at 55-8526-2561. They can also explain to you how to schedule an appointment and what you need to do. In some cases, if there is time, we will happily process your consular report of birth abroad. But most importantly, if you have urgent travel, we will certainly try to work with you, get you an emergency passport to allow you and your family, your growing family, to return to the United States.
And that question resonates with me because I was actually an American citizen born abroad. My parents were living in Madrid, Spain when I was born, so I've been an American since birth by virtue of my parents' citizenship, and they were working in the embassy at the time. So I will make sure that you get that certificate like I've had mine. It's one of my proudest possessions, and it's one of the most important things we can do for our citizens who are living abroad. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, sir. And we have another question for Consul General McCauley. And a lot of people have this same concern. They're American citizens, but they have a family member in the process of getting a non-immigrant visa. The specific question that Sunday is asking is, can you provide us a fast-track NIV program for spouses and children that are citizens of other countries to quickly exit with us and to complete the immigration process in the United States?
Thank you. I think this applies to people who are applying for immigrant visas and who wish to join their family members in the United States. Very understandable. Unfortunately, our immigrant visa operations at our Consulate General in Ciudad Juarez also reduced its services due to staffing levels there. We do continue to adjudicate some very small number of what we consider emergency cases that usually involve young people, beneficiaries who would age out of the immigrant visa process, able to immigrate to the United States. We do not anticipate people being able to enter on a non-immigrant, i.e. a tourist visa, to enter the United States and finish the immigrant visa process there. I know how hard this is on many of you. The immigrant visa process for many or most of you is a very long process, and those of you who are close to having an interview are nearing the finish line. I can only ask for your understanding and patience during this time, and we will certainly resume full operations as soon as we are safely able to do so. We just can't predict when that will be.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Landau, several viewers have asked us this question. Is there going to be a point where the borders close completely, meaning that U.S. citizens will not be able to return to the United States of America?
Well, I'm not a psychic, so I can't ever predict exactly what's going to happen in the future. I would say generally policy is always to let our own people back into our country. You may have to go through quarantine depending on what happens in the future. It is certainly our very strong policy that an American citizen should always be able to enter, his or her own country. So, that's certainly going to be our guiding principle. But I think, as any of you who've lived through these last few weeks know, these are unprecedented times, and things are changing day by day. So I think you can generally be confident that you will get back into the United States, but again, there can't be any guarantees about what the conditions on that return might be. And frankly, it could be very difficult logistically to get into the United States, particularly if you don't near the border and are planning on going by airplane. Airports may be shut down or limited. Flights may be limited. So it is certainly going to get more complicated, which is why we urge you, if your plan is to go back to the United States, to do so sooner rather than later. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, sir. And sir, that brings us to an end of this Facebook Live. We're going to be posting this to Facebook. So for those of you that were having audio problems or connection issues, you will be able to watch it later on our Facebook page. Also, remember that we will continue to answer your questions that you post in the comments section of this Facebook Live, and you may email any specific questions you have to acsmexicocity@state.gov. Ambassador Landau, to wrap this up, the big question we would ask you is, what is the most important advice you would give to U.S. citizens in Mexico right now?
Well, I would follow the health recommendations of the Mexican government as well as those of the American government. I would certainly wash my hands frequently, try to engage in social distancing, avoid crowds, stay at home if possible. If at home, try to keep up your spirits, try to take advantage of this opportunity to reconnect with your family, play board games, watch movies, do things in your household that you haven't had a chance, you've been putting off for a long time. I think that's true of all of us. That's certainly what we've been doing in my family. I'm here in Mexico with my wife, our two children. One is 19, one is 13. It's not fun always cooped up at home, but we are trying to make the best of it. I think it is wonderful to be in a beautiful country like Mexico. We love living here. And I guess it boils down to this advice: be safe, stay healthy, and remember that we are here for you. I hope that this session has been helpful. As I just to reiterate again, your safety and security is our number one priority. And this is really our job. And, I hope that we are trying to be transparent. Obviously, the situation is fluid. I am very open to doing this again. If you have found it helpful, we will look to answer the questions we received online if we didn't have a chance to do them live during this show. But again, let us know in the comments this, if you don't mind, on Facebook, just saying if you think this was helpful, because again, our job is to look out for your safety and security and to answer questions. And if nothing else, I want you at least to leave this session with a sense that these folks at the embassy and in the consulates have my back, because that's really true. And so again, we're all in this together. Let's all hang in there, and Godspeed to all of you. Take care. Thanks for joining us today.